Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Ready, Aim, Retire. I'm Rob Kirvan, your host as usual, alongside Tony Shore, the OG. Tony, how are we doing today?
That's right. Doing great,
I
Rob.
like the finger point, just like coming at the
Fantastic.
crowd. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
For those of you
So,
who listen on podcasts, you don't see the action that Tony brings to this. So I would switch over to YouTube if you get an opportunity.
oh, yeah, I
You
bring
know?
some action.
Yeah,
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 I mean, if you're familiar with Chris Farley, I'll bring some.
he does. Last week, if you listened to the show last week, which was fantastic, we had Jeremy Bryan on.
Yes.
He's the leader in the grading investments, runs an
The
entire
senior
team.
portfolio manager for grading investments. That was
Yeah.
a huge get for
Yeah,
the
and he had a
show.
great show. And last week we said it was going to air yesterday, which is the day after the election. It did. He made a couple things about the election, not predictions. We don't get political on this show, folks. So don't expect it. But he did say, "Hey, what would happen after, and what do we look at?" So if you haven't heard that show, I would go back, go back in the archives and grab that because it was a pretty decent show.
Yeah, and hopefully, behind you, we see paintings of a bull and a bear.
You do.
Over your shoulder. Yep, over your shoulder right
Yeah,
there.
I'm going backwards in the camera.
Right there. And hopefully that bull there, hopefully we can keep up this bull market. I know it spiked after the election.
Yeah.
I mean, to see the Dow Jones, that's been not a great,
No, it's a laggard. It's been a laggard for a couple of years, but I think again, we're not getting political, but I think the reason it spiked is because the election was over that night, and I think most people thought, oh boy, and me included, this thing is going to be razor thin. It's going to drag on. There's going to be recounts, possible lawsuits. I thought going into that election day, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not sleeping for 3 weeks. I just figured
the markets liked a decisive win.
That's what it is. It's markets don't like markets don't like fear. Markets don't like the unknown. So if it was dragging, I would anticipate, you wouldn't see a 1,200 down, but you'd see several down days until there was a resolution of some sort.
Right.
So that's probably why it spiked, but I'm with you. I hope it continues. I'm sure my clients are 100% with you, Tony.
Sure.
Clients generally prefer a bull market over a bear market. Generally speaking, they generally prefer that. Also better for me, my health, my hairline, my grayness. This is all 2022 right up here. I grabbed a few extra ones that year, but but onward and upward, Tony. So today we're going to discuss the difference between the accumulation phase in life and the distribution phase, because a lot of people don't really know the difference and don't really know that there is a difference until they get real close. And what I'm referring to in that is, so as we start our jobs and we get out of college or whatever we're doing, we start a job somewhere and we start putting into a qualified plan of some sort. So that could be a 401k, that could be a 403b, it could be a SEP IRA if you're self-employed. So any type of qualified plan, or if your employer didn't offer it, and if you went back, not to date myself, but if you went back 30, 35 years, they really didn't offer a lot of that kind of stuff. Very few companies did, and now it's the norm, obviously. So then you would have to put separately into an IRA or something like that, and then you just kind of go through work. You forget about it, right? You're working, and then you're growing up, and maybe you have kids, and you're worrying about that. But this is always happening in the background. So in the background, you're always accumulating money. It's going in. You pay most people, I would say, pay very little attention to it. They kind of pick their choices, and then they just run with it for 30 years and see what happens. And
that's most people.
Yeah, most people exactly do that. Like most people that come in my office, especially if they're coming into the retirement, they have no idea what they're holding. They have zero clue. It's a choice they may have made. If they've had the job for a while, it could be 10 years ago, it could be 15 years ago. They clicked a button, did a risk tolerance, I would imagine, and that's kind of what they got. So let's talk about that for first of all. So people are pretty familiar with that. So you're putting the money in, it's going in every paycheck, and the advantage of that is that you're dollar cost averaging your money in, meaning when we get crazy years like 2022, or we get markets that kind of go up and they go down and they go all around, you're still putting money in. Even this year, if you looked at, July until now, or, say, July until last week, say, the market really didn't do anything. It went up and went down and went up and went down, went up and but when it's going down, if that happens to be the day that your money goes into your 401k, you're getting a little discount on it. When you go through years like 2022, where a lot of our clients aren't peachy keen about it because they're working with. But when you're putting money into an account, that's kind of the best year. When it's going down, your money's going in at a cheaper price. So when it does come back, and markets always come back, when they do come back, you've got a real sometimes throughout that year you probably had a really good price depending on kind of when that purchase went in. So the dollar cost averaging in. And being consistent, and that's the other thing. It's consistent, especially with 401ks or 403bs, or if you have a qualified plan of some sort. It's kind of like once you set it, like I said earlier, you forget it. So the money's it's out of sight, out of mind. It's just always kind of going in, and you're taking advantage of all this stuff. And life is good. Life is good. But then what happens, Tony, is you approach retirement. So now maybe you're 5 years away, maybe you're 10 years away, maybe you're 2 years away, or maybe like I have had clients referred into me. They retired last week and said, Rob, I was told to come to you because I retired last week.
Oh boy.
So it's all the spectrum. We can help them all. We can help them all. But the earlier, I will tell you, if you're listening out there, the better. The earlier you get in here, the better off you're going to be, because from a planning standpoint, we can have tools and different strategies in place that are definitely going to put your success ratio off the charts.
Right. Because when's the best time to plant a tree, Rob? 20 years ago.
Right.
But the second best time is today.
Yes,
the earlier the better, but at the same time, the sooner the better.
Yeah. Right. And at the same time, it's like people, we get people, new people in here every week, and they're all, everyone's at a different planning phase, but they are all looking at the distribution phase. So
right. That's the trick. Accumulation, I think we've got it down. I mean, you just have that money automatically taken out of your check, or work with a financial professional like yourself, and you're putting money away on a regular basis, hopefully, into retirement accounts. That's the accumulation phase. But now you're going to get into the distribution phase. And that's where the stumbling block lies, because people aren't used to that. They don't know how to plan for that. And that's where you come in, right?
100%. So people don't, so they're used to dealing with whoever handles their 401k, or if they have somebody, they might have like a retail, money manager, that they saw on the street, drove by, and they, that's kind of how they work with them. And all of those are very good. Like I just said, they're going to accumulate money, and you're putting money in. But when it comes to distribution, you better, you better work with somebody that knows this space, because that's going to greatly increase your success in retirement. And it's very important that you look at, the taxes. It's very important that we understand your legacy. It's very important that we understand what your income need is. And these are all very important tools that we use when we look at the distribution phase. But I want to go through the first thing I want to go through, Tony, is this. I asked Tony earlier, and we did a test run, folks, so I think this is going to work. But I asked him, can you put this chart up on the screen? And Tony, I'm asking you, can you? And we will find out, folks.
Yes,
but I believe
we can. I am putting it up now. There you go.
So this may be hard. You may, if you freeze your feed to take a better look at it. But what I want to point out here, and I'm just putting my spectacles on so I can see, I have it in front of me too, is
sure.
This is the sequence of returns. So what a lot of people do is they look at what's the historical return of the stock market. Okay, that's fair. So if the historical return, you're looking at it 7 or 8%, a lot of people will get their Excel spreadsheet out and they'll put 7% every single year, and they'll take their withdrawals out and they'll be like, oh my gosh, we're golden. This is perfect. And what you don't look at are a couple factors. One, when you get into retirement, you're not going, your benchmark isn't the S&P 500, because you're going to have more of a balanced approach to it. You may have some accounts that's for sure the benchmark, but when you look at your whole portfolio, It's not benchmarked to the S&P 500 because you've accumulated these assets and now you're withdrawing money from them, so they're not full court press like they should be in most people's 401ks, especially up to I would say the age of 50 should be more market centric rather than looking at bonds and things of that nature. So they type this number in, Tony, and they say, Mary, we're good. We're going to be good for the entire time. And this is what they don't look at. So if we look at the sequence of returns, so I'm in agreement. I ran this one, and this one shows a historical average. What did we run this at? 6%. So we ran an average rate of return of 6%. Pretty reasonable,
which is pretty conservative.
Pretty conservative. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's more for balanced, right? So it's like a balanced account. So we run it at 6%. So on the left side of this chart that you're looking at is the accumulation phase. So we start off with $1 million, and it could be 300,000. Doesn't matter what the number is, but million's kind of just easy math. So we look at $1 million, and we say we look at all the way down, and there's a thing on the left which shows the return, and we have some negatives to start with, and we go all the way down, and by the end of it, on each side, all we did on each side of these two, Tony, is the return you see on the left starts at negative 12%, ends at positive 18. The return you see on the right-hand side, again, on the accumulation, account B, starts at 18% and ends at minus 12. So they're the exact same return, and all I did was flip the sequence. So you started here, and I just flipped it upside down. And when we look at that, the return at the end, both accounts have the exact same dollar figure, right? They both have $2.594 million, right?
Yep.
So they're accumulating, and we're using the exact same returns per year, but they all average to 6%. And all we did is flip-flop it. Makes sense. So that's when you're accumulating money. You're just going through your steady Eddie, and this is kind of how it looks. Now, if we flip this and we say, listen, what if I had that same $1 million and we're taking $50,000 out annually, so we're taking income out of this thing. How does the sequence of returns affect me now? So we run account A when we run account B. So if you look on your screen in this zone, I guess you can't see it because I'm pointing at the air right now. But if you look at the screen, look at the purpose. It says purpose income. So the account A on the left. So this account again starts at $1 million. The return is the exact same as the other one. So it starts at a minus 12 and it has 3 years in a row and, keeps on going on. In that regard, when I'm taking my money out and my sequence of returns, which no one can predict, is not favorable, especially in the beginning, I run out of money at year 17. So if I retired at 65, for instance, by what is that? By 78 years old, I'm out of money.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so.
And a lot of people nowadays are living to 90, even to 100.
No, wait, Tony, this is too early in the morning. It's 82. Oh my goodness. So it doesn't matter. But by age 82, I'm out of money. So, and here's another stat for you guys. If you're married and you're at the age of 65, there's a better than 50% chance that one of you makes it to 90. So I'm out of money at 82. Now what? I'm literally out of money. So if I look at the second side of that, Tony, account B, again, all we did was flip-flop the returns. These are the exact same returns. We just started and finished with the flip-flop. In this scenario, my sequence of returns didn't hurt me. I go all the way down 20 years later. Now I'm 85, still got 845,000 after taking my income throughout my retirement life. And so in that regard, I'm lucky. I'm not good. I'm lucky. In the first scenario, I'm not bad. I'm just unlucky. So the sequence of returns when we're looking at distribution have to be taken into account. And that's what I want to focus on. You can take the chart down, Tony, so they can see our beautiful faces. So
sure. But Rob, so what you're saying there with that chart is that flipping the returns when you're accumulating isn't going to affect it.
No.
But when you're pulling money out every year, $50,000 a year, the returns when you have negative years versus positive years is going to affect it. So you need to plan for that, right?
100%. And that's why you need a specialist that does this all day, every day. Because You don't want to be, in that first scenario where you're 82 years old and you're out of money.
Right.
What if you need some health care? That's going to happen too. The other stat is one of you is going to need something. One of you is going to need, at the very minimum, in-home health care, long-term care, generally, but someone's going to need something like that, or health just kind of comes up. There's just different things that happen. And if you're out of money at age 82, that's going to be a tough next 8-10 years. And you definitely have to plan for it. So I think the next question would be okay, Rob, how do you plan for it? Logical question. How do you plan for it? So here's how we would look at it. And when we look at someone's overall portfolio, we use several buckets, or we use several strategies to kind of get to where we're going. So we need, right out the get-go, Tony, I know in that scenario, you need 50,000 a year. We need an income bucket. We need something that's going to solve the income. And that could be in a variety of choice. That could be in a well-managed, low volatility bond fund, that we're just pulling money out monthly, during retirement. And in generally, we would have 3 years reserves in something like that. So if the market does do one of these, we're still A-okay. We're still pulling our money out. We have no worries about the market. Almost like when you're accumulating money, you have no worries about the market. Like I had people in 2022 thinking it was worse than 2008. And I'm like, we're at half, and they're like, oh my gosh, I think it feels way worse. Well, it feels way worse because you're retired now. When you weren't retired, didn't pay much attention to it. And generally when you're retired, you kind of have your ear on the markets a little bit more, maybe than you even want to. And especially that first year, the first year of retirement is a tough transition. I would argue the toughest transition you're ever going to make, because you're getting used to, you're getting used to it. So if you have that income bucket in place, it could also be, like it could be an annuity, Tony, that gives you income, that gives you a monthly income. So there's a variety of ways to do that. But what we do know is we need that income bucket. The second bucket we need, or the second strategy we need built into our plan, is we need a balanced strategy, a strategy where it's a mix of equity and bond, depending on everyone's risk, obviously. But we need that mix. And the reason we need that mix is once our income bucket is down to zero, we need to fill that thing back up again. So we need, a good sum in that middle bucket that gives us the ability, or if something comes up, what if something unforeseen medical comes up, we need somewhere where we know, again, if the market's not behaving, we're not going to take on a lot of water. So we need something in the middle there that kind of gives us growth, but it's more balanced. So if something goes wrong, we need money. We get, distribution requests for all sorts of things. I had a great one yesterday. This is a good distribution request, Tony. Is a couple that I've worked with, I think, for well over a decade, planning an amazing trip. Literally taking their whole family to Hawaii.
Oh, wow.
I asked if they could check me, throw me in a bag. Not enough room for Rob. So go to Hawaii. And those are kind of some of the distribution requests we get, so, but that comes out of the middle side, the more of the balance side. So, okay, well, let's do something like that. But a lot of times they could be unforeseen medical. They could have a child that needs money. Some clients will help out their grandchildren. They're going to college. They need to pull out X amount of money to help them out a little bit. So that all comes into the middle bucket. And then what you actually really need is you need the third bucket, and that's got to be growth. That's got to be long-term growth, because we're not touching it. We're letting it go. And that's, and that, again, down the road is going to be the highest performer, is going to do what your accumulation phase did. So when you get into retirement, you got there because of that accumulation phase. You got there because you had the equity exposure. And so that bucket, it depends on the risk tolerance of the individual, of the couple or individual, whoever we're dealing with, how much goes into that side. But that's a side we don't plan on touching for a while.
Sure.
A long while.
Because of the sequence. So I get it, because what sequence of return means is in the accumulation phase, to avoid that problem you illustrated, like if you have negative months in the wrong order, which you can't control, you're going to deplete your income fast if it's all in the market, full growth mode. So what you do leave in there during retirement, that needs to be money you don't touch long term and
Right.
that you're saving for later. The money you're going to use to live on or for these trips, that has to be a more balanced or a complete safe money option,
Yep.
is what you're saying. And that's how
Totally
you
correct.
avoid that sequence of returns risk. Is
And
that
then
right?
that's 100% correct. And that's a good way to put it. And then that avoids, yeah, blowing up your portfolio or your life. But you still need that exposure, because when you do get down into, to 80 or 85, you're going to want that account that's going to be sitting there growing, that you're going to use for medical or legacy, Tony.
Yeah.
Like down the road, people will talk about, once their income is in check, and once they usually once they've been retired for a little bit, then legacy becomes a little bit more important, like I've discussed on these shows, and that account could do something like that for you. So you need to have an approach that is totally different from the accumulation phase in the distribution phase, that can help mitigate the sequence of returns, because nobody knows their sequence of returns. And somebody retired January of 2000. They had a terrible sequence of returns. They went down for 3 years. Then, okay, then the market started coming back, and then guess what happened? 2007, 8, and 9. So that whole decade from 2000 to 2010 returned to zero.
Yeah.
Where if you
The
were
lost decade.
the lost decade, 100%. And if you were withdrawing money out of there, Tony, at that time, you're in big trouble
Mhm.
if you didn't have a strategy in place, and that's the value of sitting down with somebody, working with somebody, especially a fiduciary that can organize these things and has tremendous experience in building out these plans to set it and forget it. So you enjoyed life in your accumulation phase because you didn't pay much attention to it.
Right.
You can do the same thing in retirement. You can build out a plan so you can enjoy retirement. You can do a trip to Hawaii. You can do whatever you want. If you're going to Florida fishing with your buddies, you can do all of these things,
Sure.
but you're going to need that plan in place.
Yep. Well, I think that's great. And you explained sequence of returns in a great way and some strategies on how to combat the loss from sequence of returns, the dangers of it. And that is why you've illustrated why we need to work with a trusted financial professional such as yourself. So,
Right.
Rob, before we go, how can our listeners get a hold of you to ask you some questions, look at where they're at, get a second opinion, and get a plan in place?
100%. And I would also say this before I give the number out is, folks, if you're watching this, go back and then just freeze that one slide that came up and just look at it. And just, because we kind of went through it a little quickly, but like look at it and get, understand what that means, especially to your life, because I think that's a very important thing to walk away with here today. But give us a call. You can reach out to us, directly at 630-780-1099. Again, 630-780-1099, or go to our site at apadvisorsgroup.com. Again, apadvisorsgroup.com. Tremendous amount of information we have on there, Tony. We have a whole bunch of different videos. We discuss things like this, and this. It's very important, and it's very important that if you're even listening to this and thinking about, hey, I got to get this organized. It's like anything, Tony. Kick the can down the road. Give us a call. It costs you, costs you absolutely nothing to sit down with me for 45 minutes. Discuss your
All it
situation.
costs you is the time, which is
Right.
only 45 minutes to an hour.
Exactly. And then
Right.
and then get a fiduciary review of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like get a fiduciary review. We'll be able, we have to show you transparency and show you, hey, this is what you're doing, this is what you could be doing. But if you're doing something great, got to tell you, which we have. Hey, you're on track. You don't need to change anything in what's going on here. So I'd encourage that. Just definitely reach out to us.
All right. Well, Rob, great show today on accumulation versus distribution, learning about sequence of returns risk. Great show. And if our listeners want to get a copy of that chart you showed, all they have to do is give the office a call, especially to set up that consultation, 630-780-1099 or apadvisorsgroup.com. And listeners and viewers, thanks for tuning in. That does it for today's episode of Ready, Aim, Retire with our host, Rob Kirvan.